This is John for Global Traveler. This morning, I have the pleasure of talking travel with travel journalist and author and writer, Paige McClanahan. How are you, Paige?
I'm doing very well, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I should have said good afternoon because you're in Paris. How are things in
How
Paris?
are things in Paris? Yeah, the sun has just come out. It was cloudy this morning, but the sun's just come out here, and yeah, weather's turned a little cooler for the autumn, but yeah, I'm ready for it. There's still a lot of green in the park, just down the road, so enjoying that while it lasts for sure.
Oh, lovely, lovely. Well, I brought you here today or asked you on to talk about your new book, The New Tourist, Waking Up to the Power and Peril of Travel. First, I'd like to get just a little bit of background information. If you can give us kind of an abbreviated bio of how you got to where you are.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm an American. I grew up in North Carolina, but I've lived overseas for the last 16 years and have moved around quite a lot to Switzerland, West Africa, the UK, East Africa, and for the last 6 years, I've been here in France. And so travel has always been a huge part of my life, and I've been a journalist for a long time. And I've done a lot of different, I've been a writer and a journalist on lots of different topics, including, economic topics and international trade and environmental topics. And I was doing travel writing for a long time, kind of on the side, a little bit on the side. But 6 years ago, I moved with my family to a little village in the French Alps, where I really saw how tourism was the bedrock of the local economy and how it was really kind of bringing life to a really remote corner of the Alps. And I started to look at my travel writing in a different way, just, in becoming a resident of a tourist destination. And I started exploring tourism in a more kind of profound way or in a more sort of nuanced or in-depth way in my journalism. And I just really was fascinated by everything I was discovering. And I thought, there's so much here. There's so much to explore here. There's so much I want to share with my readers. And I was coming up against the sort of the word count limits of my newspaper journalism. So I came up with the idea for a book. And yeah, it was published in June, really, helping people. My goal with the book was really to take people on a little adventure with me, and then at the same time to help them kind of wake up to the stakes of tourism, which I see as, certainly like something we like to do for fun. It's also an economic activity, of course, but it's also a really vast and potent social force. And I think we would all do well to kind of realize the power that's inherent in tourism.
So you said that you've lived in 5 countries, I believe, since the U.S. What
Yeah.
brought you to each of those countries?
Oh wow, that's a long story. First to Switzerland, I got a job working at a think tank in Geneva, Switzerland, where I was writing news for a very specialist audience about the World Trade Talks. So that was my first like gig writing news, and yeah, that was in Geneva. And then after that, moving to Sierra Leone, I really wanted to break into journalism, like kind of writing for big newspapers and magazines. And I thought, let me go to a corner of the world that's like a little bit underrepresented in the media, and let me try to sort of pitch stories from there. And so I was in Sierra Leone. That's where I first got my first gig as a travel writer. I produced the second edition of the Brat Guide to Sierra Leone. That was actually my first travel writing gig, going around the whole country, like talking to anybody and everybody who had anything to do with tourism in Sierra Leone. So that was a full-on immersion in the travel writing space. And after like 2 years in Sierra Leone, I thought, that's kind of like that was a good experience. I was ready for other things. And at that point, I had started writing for The Guardian. So moved to England and continued as a freelance journalist, but also had a good gig going with The Guardian there. Lived in Oxford for 2 years. And then after 2 years in England, moved to Kenya. And there I got a job with the UN Environment Program, where I was working in the communication division at the UN Environment Program, which has its global headquarters in Nairobi, Kenya. So I was in Kenya for almost 4 years. And yeah, really enjoying writing about environmental issues and some, social political issues around the environment there. And then, yeah, moved with my family to France in 2018. And that was really kind of a lifestyle choice. And, my husband and I had two children, and we wanted to find a nice kind of stable place for them to live and grow up. And so yeah, we chose this little village in the French Alps that we had got, as I write in the book, that we had gotten to know when we were living in Geneva. And I went back into being a freelance journalist and started really writing a lot for the New York Times from there, and really exploring tourism. So yeah, but I'm ready now. France has been, we left the mountains in the summer of 2023 and are now in Paris and have been here, yes, for just over a year. And now I think this is going to be the landing place for the foreseeable future while the girls get big.
Well, you
So
beat me to my next
I'm
question.
hoping so.
Yeah, you beat me to my
It's not a
next
bad place
question.
to end up. Yeah,
So you plan on staying in
that's the
for
plan.
at
That's the
least the
plan.
foreseeable future. Okay.
Yeah.
When you started to write your book, did you have it's the power and the peril, so it's the plus and the minus. Did you intend to balance it out, or did you intend to wherever it landed, it landed?
My goal was really to tell the truth as I saw it, and the truth as I saw it was really, I mean, obviously very nuanced and included all of the extremes from really profoundly beneficial to profoundly negative. And I knew that in order to write something honest and true and interesting and worthy of my reader, I needed to include the good and the bad because tourism is the good and the bad, right? So in terms of getting that balance right, I mean, my first job as a writer, the first job of any kind of storyteller, in quotes, anyone trying to communicate a message is to hold my audience's attention, right? So I knew that I needed to write something in a very, I need to write something very engaging. Even if I was going to address challenging topics, I wanted to do so in a way that was going to be really inviting for my reader and really engaging for them. So I really try throughout the book, through some first person kind of stories and anecdotes, and through, what I hope is some engaging, I hope like interviews with, kind of the real people I met on the ground to really bring people along with me. And I really like, my goal is really just to help my reader kind of grasp the huge stakes and the huge kind of diversity of experiences and effects that we can see within the world of tourism. Because by understanding that, the full diversity of things that we can experience in the world of tourism, good and bad, then we can really try to work toward minimizing the negative and maximizing the positive.
So along those lines, what would you say is the most positive aspect of travel?
I mean, human connection, absolutely. I mean, there are many positive aspects of travel. I mean, from supporting communities that otherwise have no economic lifeline, as I saw in my own little village in the French Alps. I mean, does that always happen? Absolutely not. Can it happen? Yes. Can it happen really beautifully? Yes. Does it always? Absolutely not, right? So, I think for me, from the perspective of, a tourist myself, somebody who is, spent my most of my adult life being a visitor in other countries, right? Human connection and really just travel gives us a chance to get a glimpse of like our smallness as individuals in the great sea of humanity and the vast stretches of time, right?
Sure.
We are very small. And I think that the modesty, the humility that comes with leaving one's home can be really profound. But really, the chance to connect with people from across, across borders, across boundaries, from other cultures. I mean, I'll tell one story, one anecdote that I recount in the book. The place that I was probably most scared to visit during my travels was Saudi Arabia, which was a part of the world that I didn't know at all. I was very nervous to go there, but I went and I had a really mind-opening experience. I wouldn't say my views on the country's politics have shifted at all. If anything, they've kind of grown more entrenched, um, in what I was always already feeling. But my understanding of what Saudi Arabia is as a nation has certainly shifted. And I had one experience with a young man. I was with my tour guide, Fatima, who's a fascinating woman. She was going to drive me to the airport, and but the battery on her truck died, and we were in a kind of a parking lot in a busy corner of Riyadh. And this young man sort of jogged over and he gave us a jump, and he was very helpful. And as soon as he realized I was American, he started speaking excellent English. And so, we thanked him profusely for the jump. And then it was like, okay, time to go to the airport. And he said, wait, 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 and then he wanted to ask me questions about the United States. And he wanted to tell me that he went to the US, he went to Orlando and New York the year before with a friend of his. And he was like, do you know what? I was so scared to go to the United States, he told me. I was so scared to go because of like what he'd heard about crime and guns and violence. He went to Orlando and New York, and he was like, but you know what? He was like, I felt so safe the entire time I was
No.
there. And I was like, goosebumps. And I
That's
was like,
cool.
wow. I was like, Abdullah, like, I am so glad you had that experience. I am so glad. And he was just so excited to have the chance to tell this to me. And I was like, you know what? Like, I had that was my experience exactly in Saudi Arabia. And he told me, you know what? He was like amazed to tell me this. He was like, the United States is nothing like what you see on the news or in social media. And I was like, oh wow. That was my experience of going to Saudi Arabia. I was so scared to go as a solo female traveler and a journalist. I was scared to go. And I was met with so much hospitality. I was met with so much graciousness, from everyone I encountered there, male and female, such a warmth. I was greeted with such warmth in that country. And it's like, that's the power of travel. It helps us understand that, you know, our nations, groups of people, we're more than the leaders who sit at the top of our sort of political food chain. We are so much more than that. We're all human beings. And, it might sound really kind of cliche to say, but like, we're all just human. And if we travel to and we visit people, we meet people, then we have the chance to really remind ourselves of that in a way that can leave a mark. And that did certainly for me in Saudi Arabia, just as it did for Abdullah on his trip to the United States.
I love that though. I love that the story of a dead battery leads you to a cool story
It
like
was
that.
wonderful. I was like, I got chills. And I was like, oh, this is definitely going in the book. This has got to go in the book.
Exactly. What did you learn about yourself through writing the book?
Oh, wow. Oh, John, that's a big question. A lot. Oh my
Right.
gosh. Yeah, thank you for that question. Well, first of all, I learned a lot about writing book. This is my first book. And one thing I learned just how important immediate deadlines are for me. So I had to sort of set myself some intermediate deadlines, whereas my book editor was like, just send me the manuscript when you're finished. But by the way, there was this big hard deadline that's written into your contract. And I was like, oh my gosh. Like, so I had to, have a friend who like I gave her like my intermediate deadlines, and every month I would send her the work that I was doing. So the importance of intermediate deadlines. But yeah, maybe at a sort of more kind of a bigger picture perspective, that like I don't need to have a plan necessarily. When I traveled a lot for the book, and sometimes at first, especially, I was like, okay, before I go on this trip, I need to understand exactly what I'm going to write about this place. I need to like line up all of my interviews. I need to make sure I get like all of the details I get to so I can tell this story about this place. And then you get there and you meet who you meet, and you don't meet who you don't meet. And you have Abdullah give you a jump in the parking lot, and it's just like, you just have like traveling, right? You have a plan. It's important to have a plan and a structure and a general mindset for where you want to go. And it's equally important to be completely open to what the place has to offer you, to really keep your expectations in check. And for me as a writer, as a journalist, to follow the story, to follow reality, not to come and sort of project my expectations and then look for the quotes that are going to match up with what I think in advance is going to be the story. No, my job is to go talk to as many people as I can across the spectrum of like, different people from different backgrounds who work in different fields, who, work in tourism, are affected by tourism, who hate tourism. My job is to talk to everyone and then sift through that stuff. And that's how I find the story. And so really, it was an act of kind of letting go and, of my sort of like the planning side of my brain, and really letting myself be open to the experience, and trusting that the story that I was going to tell, that I needed to tell, the story that I should tell about this place would kind of filter its way through if I stayed open and trusted the process.
Okay. So your book, The New Tourist, Waking Up to the Power and Peril of Travel, without, obviously, I'm not looking to be negative about other books. How is your book different than other travel books?
But I think a lot of really important, like, and really good travel books have been written about like how to be, a sustainable traveler, or how to do, slow travel, or how to be mindful traveler. And I think those are all really, really helpful, and really good and really important. What I think is what my book does a little bit differently. Like, I'm not prescriptive. I mean, I have maybe some ideas, or I kind of share a few thoughts, or can kind of glean some tips from what I share. But really, my goal was to give people the motivation to go and buy those other books, or to ask their own questions or to make their own list of do's and don'ts. Because it was like, how do we inspire behavior change in someone, just in any context? Like if I'm thinking of like my children, like how do they have to sort of understand the reasoning behind it. Like why does this matter? Like, why does it matter that that I'm 10 years old and I don't go to bed at 11 o'clock at night, right? Because like let's try to show the consequences. What are the stakes? It's like, okay, you're gonna be tired and you're not gonna do well at school. Like, so, let me like work with my reader to help them understand the context here, understand the stakes, understand like what's going to happen if we continue to travel in a really kind of consumerist way that has kind of a lot of colonial overtones. Like, why does it matter that we, why is it important that we try to move away from that? And so I thought, yeah, that doing, trying to engage my reader and doing so through stories was a really hopefully was going to be an effective way to do that.
Well, I did. I don't have your book yet. I have ordered it from Amazon. I checked the
Cool.
reviews on
Thank
Amazon.
you.
You've got a lot of positive reviews there. And the thing that I took away from reading the summary of your book and the reviews, I love it that power and peril of travel. So it's the good, the bad, but people are taking such a positive pull from it, where even the bad things, the worst things of travel that you mentioned, it's really just to get past those and to kind of fix those or to do what you can to prevent those. So I love that part of your book. I look forward to reading the rest of it because, after talking to you and hearing the story, like you said about the dead battery, I love that kind of stuff.
I think tourism is a huge force and it's here to stay, right? I mean, I think it's growing. We're going to have more than 1.5 billion international tourist arrivals this year. Like, tourism is a huge force. It's not going anywhere. And I think, and some people kind of wring their hands about that and they say, oh, mass tourism destroying the planet. And I say, like, okay, are there aspects of tourism that's destructive? Yeah. Yeah. Are there aspects of tourism that are really not only important, but I would say essential to the future of humanity, right? Like, I would say yes to that too. Because, if we think about, so it was really important for me to highlight the constructive potential of travel, because I mean, I think, if you think about the crises that humanity is going to face in the years and decades to come, I mean, runaway AI or nuclear war or like catastrophic climate change, another pandemic that's even worse, I mean, all of these crises are completely ignorant of national borders. Our society is interconnected. So never in the history of humanity, right? Like, has it been more important for us to be able to empathize with people like Abdullah in Saudi Arabia, people who,
Exactly.
right? Like, we need to understand each other. If we all stay at home or like never leave our home cities or never leave our home states or home countries, like, that's really like, if we all did that, that's really not going to prepare us for the future as a human race. Like, we need to work together now. And tourism, I just think, is such a beautiful way to achieve those kinds of, human connections, which, if taken from the right perspective, if done with the right motivation, can really be, I mean, it might sound like going a bit far, but it can be a really profound force for peace, even. And I believe that. I believe that really deeply.
No, yeah, absolutely. Like you said, your little experience in with the dead battery, his
Mm,
experience in Orlando, New York, those are just two little examples of people, how mindsets can be changed.
absolutely.
And then you tell those stories, and then other people, maybe it encourages somebody to go to Saudi Arabia or other country where they might not have gone before.
Yeah,
So I applaud it.
thank you. Yeah. And I think, just in general, I would say, we don't necessarily, in traveling, I mean, somebody listening to this, you have, of course, we need to think about carbon footprint, and we need to think about, I mean, we all operate within finite budgets, right? Personally, right? Um, and you don't need to necessarily think about, okay, well, I need to travel to another continent to have the kind of experience that I had with Abdullah. I mean, I could have had that sort of experience here in Paris, but traveling to like another community here in this city, that where, that probably like speaks a language other than French or English, and where I could have a very different cultural experience than what I have in my neighborhood and with my neighbors and my kids who are in the public school just down the road. You don't necessarily have to travel far to have that kind of get outside of your comfort zone experience. And so I would encourage people to think about how they can look for those similar sorts of experiences close to home, as well as, when they travel farther away on vacation.
Excellent advice. Before I let you go, tell everybody where they can find out more information about you and your book, The New Tourist, Waking Up to the Power and Peril of Travel.
Thank you so much. You can follow me on Instagram. I'm on Instagram at Paige McClanahan. And if you want to find the book, if you Google The New Tourist, it's up on the Simon & Schuster website, and there are links there to all of the different booksellers, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Bookshop, and you can get your hands on it, through the website.
Sounds good. That's where I will be getting my hands on it. I don't have it yet, but I will be getting it. And I look forward to reading it. And I really appreciate your time, and I appreciate what you're doing for the travel industry, exposing all sides of it, and basically overall encouraging a little mindful thought, but travel and tourism.
Yeah. Let's get out there and let's have fun, and let's do it with the right mindset. And I think that's a win for everybody.
It's a perfect way to end. Paige, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. Go out and enjoy the rest of your evening in France.
Thank you so much, John. Have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, you too.